A husband walks into a gun store with a pistol he bought 18 months ago. He paid $600 for it. The dealer offers him $275. The husband says there must be a mistake. The dealer shakes his head. No mistake. That's what it's worth now. This is happening all over the country right now. Guns that held stable prices for years suddenly lost half their value in less than 2 years. Some of these were budget models that got flooded out. Others were premium pieces that the market just stopped caring about. A few were victims of their own manufacturers releasing something better 6 months later. What follows is not speculation. These are 12 firearms that experienced documented resale collapse between early 2024 and late 2025. The data comes from aggregated dealer buy prices, completed private sales, and auction close rates across multiple regions. Your local market may vary. This is observation, not advice. Before any of this makes sense, you need to understand what actually moves gun prices. It is not quality. It is not even a reputation. It is the gap between how many people want to sell and how many people want to buy. When that gap widens fast, prices do not slide. They collapse. 2024 started with the tail end of uncertainty-driven demand. By mid-year, that demand evaporated. Buyers got selective, sellers got desperate, and certain models that had been sitting in safes as safe holds suddenly became liabilities. I have been tracking firearm market trends since 2008. I watched the panic spikes. I watched the post-election crashes. But what happened to these 12 models was different. This was not politics. This was the market deciding that certain designs no longer justified their price, and it happened faster than anyone expected. The Browning Citori over-under shotgun held value like almost nothing else in the sporting world. Clay shooters treated them as heirlooms. Competitive shooters kept multiples. The used market stayed strong because supply was limited and buyers trusted the name. In early 2024, older Citoris still commanded 4 figures without question. Then the shooting sports economy fractured. Discretionary income tightened. Clay ranges saw membership declines. Suddenly, the people who kept premium shotgun prices high were not buying. They were selling, and they were all selling at the same time. Over-under shotgun sales dropped 4% in the first quarter of 2025. In a niche market like sporting clays, that is not a dip. That is structural collapse. Dealers who had been sitting on trade-ins for months started cutting prices just to clear space. Clean Citoris that would have sold immediately 2 years earlier sat untouched for weeks. What made it worse was that these were not estate sales or distressed owners. These were longtime shooters making calculated exits. They flooded a small market with high-quality examples all at once. Buyers had their pick. Prices fell accordingly. The Citori is still an exceptional shotgun. The market just stopped rewarding that. The Remington 870 Wingmaster defined what a pump shotgun should be for over 70 years. 11 million sold worldwide. It became the default answer to the question of what shotgun to buy. Reliability was assumed. Durability was proven, and for most of its history, resale value stayed consistent. But volume eventually becomes a problem. There are simply too many 870s in circulation. Every gun shop has a rack of them. Every online marketplace has dozens listed. And pump-action shotguns as a category dropped 9% in sales during 2024. That put downward pressure on everything in the segment. The Wingmaster models used to command a premium over the cheaper Express line because of better fit and finish. That premium evaporated. Dealers stopped distinguishing between them on trade-ins because buyers were not paying extra for the nicer version anymore. The market treated them all as interchangeable. These are genuinely excellent firearms. They will outlast their owners. But excellence does not create scarcity. And without scarcity, prices fall to wherever supply finds equilibrium with demand. Right now, that equilibrium is much lower than it was 24 months ago. The Remington 7600 pump-action rifle occupied an odd position. Not a lever gun, not a semi-auto, not a bolt action. It appealed to a specific type of hunter who valued familiarity over speed or precision. That narrow appeal held steady for decades. Then it just stopped. Pump rifles do not offer meaningful advantages anymore. They are slower than semi-autos, less smooth than levers, less accurate than bolts. When the overall rifle market contracted by 12%, niche actions like this were the first to get cut from consideration. New buyers ignored them. Experienced buyers moved on. Owners who had kept them as backup rifles decided to liquidate. The used market was suddenly filled with examples that had seen light use and were well maintained. In a healthy market, that would be appealing. In a contracting market, it just meant more supply chasing fewer buyers. These rifles are not flawed. They are simply unnecessary. The market decided that every role a pump rifle fills can be done better by something else. And when the market makes that decision, resale value follows. The Marlin 1895 lever action rode a wave of renewed interest in big-bore lever guns. Hunters rediscovered the appeal of 4570. Collectors appreciated the traditional design. For a few years, demand was strong and prices reflected that. Then quality control problems surfaced. Some production runs had issues that older Marlins never experienced. Buyers who had paid premium prices found themselves dealing with extraction failures and finish problems. That damaged the brand exactly when it was trying to capitalize on market enthusiasm. Ruger's acquisition of Marlin created additional uncertainty. No one knew which models would continue, which would be updated, and which would be discontinued. That uncertainty made buyers hesitant. If you are spending serious money on a rifle, you want to know the company will support it. Lever-action rifle sales dropped 9% in early 2025. The hunting community that had driven demand for big-bore rifles faced the same economic pressures as everyone else. Expensive sporting rifles became harder to justify. Discretionary purchases got delayed or canceled. The used market absorbed all of this at once. Recent production Marlins that had been bought during the enthusiasm peak were now being sold by owners who realized they did not actually need a big-bore lever gun. These were not collectible vintage pieces. They were 3-year-old rifles that had lost their novelty. Prices adjusted accordingly. The Savage Axis was the budget bolt action that was supposed to prove cheap did not mean bad. It was accurate enough for deer hunting, affordable enough for new shooters, reliable enough that experienced hunters kept them as truck guns. For a while, it occupied that space successfully. Overproduction during the pandemic buying surge created a problem. Savage made far more of these than the market could absorb once demand normalized. Inventory piled up. Dealers started discounting new rifles just to move them. That put immediate pressure on used prices. Competition intensified. Ruger American, Tikka T3X Lite. Even Remington re-entered the budget bolt action space with updated offerings. All of these provided features the Axis lacked. Buyers started comparing options more carefully. The Axis stopped being the default choice. Bolt-action rifle sales dropped 12% overall. Budget models were hit hardest because buyers were making fewer impulse purchases. If you are being selective, you either buy the absolute cheapest option or you skip the budget tier entirely and buy something nicer. The middle ground collapsed. New shooters who bought an Axis during the pandemic decided to upgrade to something with better ergonomics or more features. Hunters who grabbed one as a backup decided they did not need it. The used market was flooded with functional rifles that no one particularly wanted. And when supply outpaces demand, prices fall until equilibrium is restored. The Ruger P95 pistol represented solid engineering from an earlier era of handgun design. Built like a tank, priced fairly, reliable enough that police departments issued them and civilians trusted them. But the pistol market moved on, and 2024 made that obvious. The P-Series belongs to a generation of handguns that prioritize durability over modularity. No optics cut, limited customization, ergonomics that feel outdated compared to modern striker-fired designs. When the market shifted toward optics-ready platforms, this pistol had no path forward. Ruger's own success worked against it. The company's newer striker-fired models made the P95 look ancient by comparison. Why buy a used P95 when you can get a new Ruger Security 9 or American pistol with modern features for similar money? Consumers made that calculation and chose the new guns. The used market was flooded with trade-ins from owners upgrading to contemporary designs. These were not collectible vintage pistols with historical value. They were simply outdated tools that had been replaced by better options. Semi-automatic handgun sales dropped 7%, but older models without modern features suffered much steeper declines. The market became unforgiving toward pistols that could not adapt. Optics mounting, modularity, improved ergonomics. These were not luxuries anymore. They were baseline expectations, and guns that could not meet those expectations lost value fast. The Sig Sauer P250 was supposed to change how modular handguns worked. Interchangeable grip modules, caliber conversions. The engineering was ambitious and the concept was genuinely innovative, but the execution had problems that kept it from ever gaining real traction. The trigger was mediocre. The ergonomics were awkward. The modularity that was supposed to be the main selling point felt overly complicated for what it actually delivered. People bought into the idea and then realized the reality did not match the promise. Then Sig released the P320. It took the modular concept and refined everything that did not work on the P250. Better trigger, better ergonomics, simpler system. The P320 became massively popular with law enforcement and civilians. The P250 became a footnote. Consumers who had bought into the original modular promise started upgrading to the P320 or other modern striker-fired pistols. The P250 became a trade and special. Dealers accepted them because customers wanted to get rid of them, not because there was strong resale demand. When the handgun market contracted, older models were the first to lose value. Buyers being selective about their purchases had no reason to choose the P250 over newer alternatives. It was not collectible. It was not particularly cheap. It was just obsolete. And obsolete guns lose value quickly. The Glock 43 subcompact was a game changer when it launched. Finally, a single-stack 9mm from the most trusted name in defensive pistols. It sold extremely well. Concealed carriers loved it. And for a couple of years, it held its value because demand stayed strong. Then Glock kept improving the design. The 43X offered more capacity in nearly the same footprint. The 48 provided even more rounds with barely any increase in size. Suddenly, the original 43 felt limited. Why carry 6 or 7 rounds when you could carry 10 in the same space? The optics revolution made things worse. Red dots on pistols went from niche to mainstream almost overnight. The 43 had no optics cut, no MOS version, no easy way to mount a red dot without expensive custom work. Guns that could not accept optics started feeling outdated immediately. The market responded predictably. Owners traded in their 43s for 43X MOS models or other optics-ready subcompacts. The used market was flooded with perfectly functional pistols that suddenly felt old. And when semi-automatic handgun sales dropped 7%, older models without modern features took the hardest hit. Glock made a lot of 43s. When a significant percentage of owners decided to upgrade at the same time, the used market could not absorb them all. Supply overwhelmed demand. Prices fell. The 43 is still a reliable pistol. The market just moved on to options that offer more. The Heritage Rough Rider revolver was the entry point into cowboy action shooting for a lot of people. Affordable, fun to shoot, accurate enough to be entertaining. It found a niche with new shooters and casual plinkers. But the revolver market turned brutal in 2024 and budget options got crushed. Heritage produced enormous quantities of these during the pandemic boom. They flooded the market with inexpensive 22 single actions. When demand normalized, there were simply too many of them in circulation. Dealers could not move inventory. Prices started dropping on new guns, which immediately hurt used values. Revolver sales dropped over 20% in early 2025. That was the worst performance of any handgun category. Consumers increasingly preferred higher capacity semi-autos. Even traditional revolver buyers became much more selective about what they purchased. Budget revolvers were the first to get cut. The Rough Rider got caught in the middle of this. It was never a premium product. It had found success by being cheap and fun. But when the market contracted, cheap and fun was not enough. Buyers who were making fewer purchases wanted something that felt more substantial. The used market was flooded with examples from impulse buyers who rarely shot them. These were not collectible Colts or Smith & Wessons with historical value. They were budget revolvers that had served their purpose and were now expendable. The decline was particularly brutal because these were already priced aggressively when new. Used examples selling for significantly less created a race to the bottom. The Smith & Wesson M and P Shield dominated the concealed carry market for years. Slim profile, reliable function, trusted brand. It was the default recommendation for people looking for a carry gun. But the concealed carry market is intensely competitive, and newer designs left the Shield behind. Capacity became the issue. The single-stack design limited it to 7 or 8 rounds. Then Sig released the P365, which packed 10 or more rounds into a similar-sized package. That changed expectations. Buyers started asking why they should accept lower capacity when alternatives existed. The optics issue compounded the problem. The original Shield had no optics cut. Even when Smith & Wesson released the Shield Plus with higher capacity and optics capability, the damage was done. Consumers had already moved on to other platforms. The original Shield felt outdated. The market responded exactly as expected. Owners traded up to higher capacity optics-ready alternatives. The used market was flooded with functional shields that suddenly felt inadequate. When semi-automatic handgun sales dropped 7%, older designs without modern features suffered the steepest declines. Volume made the problem worse. Smith & Wesson sold a tremendous number of shields. When a large percentage of those owners decided to upgrade simultaneously, the used market could not handle the influx. Supply crushed demand. Prices fell hard. The shield is still a solid pistol. The market just expects more now. The Ruger AR-556 was positioned as the everyman's AR-15. Reliable, affordable, backed by Ruger's reputation. It found strong sales during periods of political uncertainty when buyers wanted an AR but did not want to spend premium money. Then multiple factors hit it at once. Political pressure eased after the election of a pro-gun president. Fear-based buying disappeared. The urgency that had driven AR-15 sales evaporated. Buyers who had been rushing to purchase before potential bans realized there was no rush anymore. Demand dropped immediately. Market saturation intensified. Every manufacturer makes an AR-15 now. Many offer features the AR-556 lacks. Better triggers, free-float handguards, improved furniture. The competition became fierce while the AR-556 remained fairly basic. Buyers comparing options increasingly chose something else. State-level legislation created regional complications. Assault weapon bans in multiple states made AR-15s illegal to sell in those markets. That fragmented demand and created weird price variations depending on location. The used market became harder to navigate. Semi-automatic rifle sales dropped 13%. Basic models suffered even steeper declines. Buyers making careful purchasing decisions either went very cheap or skipped the budget tier entirely and bought something with more features. The middle ground collapsed. First-time AR buyers who purchased during panic buying phases decided to upgrade to rifles with better components. Owners who grabbed one as a backup decided they did not need it. The used market was flooded with functional rifles that were simply outclassed by newer options. And when supply overwhelms demand, prices fall until they find equilibrium. The Taurus Judge revolver promised ultimate versatility. Shoot 45 Colt for power. Shoot 410 shells for flexibility. Get the reliability of a revolver. On paper, it sounded perfect. In reality, it became the example of a gun that sounds better than it performs. The problems were fundamental. It was mediocre at everything. The 410 shells lacked power for serious defensive use. The 45 Colt was less accurate than a dedicated pistol caliber revolver. The whole package was bulky and awkward to carry or shoot well. But it had found a market with buyers who liked the concept more than the execution. That market collapsed when revolver sales dropped over 20% in early 2025. Novelty revolvers were hit hardest. Buyers being selective about their purchases had no reason to choose a gun that did multiple things poorly over a gun that did one thing well. The used market was flooded with examples from owners who bought into the hype but realized they did not actually need a revolver that fired two different cartridges badly. These were not collectible firearms with historical significance. They were gimmicky guns that had lost their novelty. The decline was particularly severe because the Judge was already controversial among experienced shooters. When the market turned against revolvers generally, it had few defenders. Regional legislation made things worse. Some states restricted the 410 capability, making it even less attractive to potential buyers. The fragmented market could not support its already limited appeal. Prices fell to levels that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. It became the clearest example of what happens when versatility without excellence meets a contracting market. 12 firearms. 12 different reasons for value collapse. But the pattern is consistent. Markets do not care about quality when supply overwhelms demand. They do not care about reputation when newer options offer more. And they do not care about what a gun used to be worth when buyers have better alternatives. Some of these declines were predictable. Niche designs losing ground to mainstream options. Budget models getting flooded out by overproduction. Others caught everyone off guard. Glock 43s losing value because Glock made better Glocks. Citori's crashing because the shooting sports economy contracted. What connects them is simple. The market evolved faster than these firearms could adapt. Technology shifted toward optics-ready platforms and modularity. Consumer preferences shifted toward higher capacity and modern features. Economic conditions shifted away from premium sporting goods and novelty purchases. And state-level politics created fragmentation that hurt certain categories more than others. If you bought any of these guns as investments, that was a miscalculation. Firearms are tools. They hold value when demand stays strong and supply stays limited. When either of those factors changes, prices move. And when both change at once, prices collapse. If you own any of these guns, that does not mean you made a mistake. A gun that lost resale value can still function perfectly for its intended purpose. The shield still conceals well. The 870 still shoots reliably. The Axis still takes deer. The market not valuing them anymore does not make them useless. But if you were planning to sell, understanding why values drop matters. You are not getting lowballed. The market genuinely shifted. Buyers have more options now and fewer reasons to choose older designs. That is not going to change unless supply contracts significantly or some external factor drives new demand. Recovery is unlikely for most of these. The Citori might stabilize if the shooting sports economy recovers. The Marlin might regain value if Ruger fixes quality issues and builds collector interest. But guns like the P250 or the Judge are probably staying low. They were replaced by better options from their own manufacturers. There is no path back. The broader lesson is that gun values are not guaranteed. Panic buying creates temporary spikes that always correct. Overproduction creates supply gluts that take years to clear. And innovation makes older designs obsolete faster than most people expect. If you are buying guns, buy them because you will use them, not because you think they will be appreciated. The market will keep evolving. New technology will keep emerging. Consumer preferences will keep shifting, and some percentage of guns being sold today will be on a similar list 2 years from now. That is how markets work. They reward what people want right now, not what used to be valuable. These 12 guns crashed because the market stopped wanting them. Some deserved it. Others were just in the wrong place when conditions changed. But the result is the same. Lower prices, slower sales, and owners realize that what they paid is not what they can get back.